Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad you're all here. We have done, I think this is the fifth one of these that we have done, and we are thrilled. I am personally thrilled and so grateful that you take time out of your busy schedule to spend some time with me. I'm honored and humbled by it. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these webinars, and I'm sure a lot of you have webinar fatigue and Zoom fatigue. So I'm just going to be really respectful of your time today. Here's how our time's going to go. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start out sharing with you what's happening in the reopening. And then I'm going to give you the three scenarios that I think you're all going to be facing, whether you're at a 0 or at a 10. I don't think anybody's at a 10. We're probably here in Arizona at about a 5 or so. But we're everywhere, right? We're all up and down the continuum. So I'm just going to share about what reopening means and what's happening around reopening. And at the end, I'm just going to ask you to do me a huge favor and just take a quick poll. I think it's about 4 questions long to give me a sense of my own reopening. You know, I'm constantly trying to be sensitive, not being tone deaf, while at the same time we're wanting to move the business forward. And so I'd really appreciate, this is a great sample size. I think we have over 600, 700, something like that registered for today's webinar. So would just appreciate if you'd take 1 minute at the end, maybe 10 seconds at the end and answer those polling questions for me. So let's jump in. Here we are in May. And it is the first week of May, and all of you from all over the country and some of you from different parts of the world are experiencing the return to these circumstances in a very, very different way. And so what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be spending time with you talking about how to manage the reopening and what to do and what not to do. There are certain things that are happening psychologically and sociologically and financially in the country right now that are starting to show some signs of stress. And I want to give you some hope around that and help you see the world in a rational, reasonable way, so that when you're making decisions about you and your family and how that's all going to work, you can be very successful at that. So what I want to think about first right away is this. Let's lay the foundation for how we're going to proceed today. We're going to look at foundationally exactly what we need to be looking at in order to accomplish the things we need to accomplish. So first of all, let's talk about the foundation. The foundation is what we need to think about is there's good news. There isn't a lot of it, but if you look for it, there's good news. And so I want us to be thinking about whether you're in New York in a 0 or in Pennsylvania in a 0, or whether you're in Arizona, maybe a 5, a 6, or a 7, or whether you're somewhere else, Florida, which is probably a little bit higher. I want you just to search for the good news. The second thing is, community has risen to the top. One of the important things about reopening, whether you reopen now or next week or next month, the thing that I am most heartened by, the thing that I think is the best news of all, is this idea of community. Never before has it been more important than it is right now today. Communities are growing weary. People are getting tired. The stress is starting to get to people. So I want to encourage you that if you're a leader, to leverage your reopening, leverage your community to help your followers. If you're an individual contributor, I want you to look at what your circles are and what your community of influence is, so that you can be really, really mindful of the power of community. We have to lean on each other now. We have to help each other, and we have to guard against some of this craziness that's going on. I know this is going to sound obvious to you, but there are those that see the world different than you. Do you need a minute for that? I don't want it to leave any pain on you there. There are people who see the world differently than you, and they're going to continue to see the world differently than you. And what we're going to learn in this next hour together is, how do we manage people who see the world so significantly different than you and I? You can't change or control another person. I know. You thought this was going to be all Mike being positive, seeing us through the fire. You can't change or control people. And I'll bet you, in fact, I'd like to get an amen in the chat. If you've ever made an attempt in your life to change or control another person, now be honest, you know you can trust it. We're here all by ourselves. If you've ever, if you've ever tried to change or control another person, just put an amen. I know it doesn't work. You're right, Jennifer, but man, we've tried it, haven't we? And no matter what, it seems like we keep trying. Facebook has turned into the craziest place, hasn't it? It has turned into the Wild West of people trying to change each other and that kind of thing. So what does that leave us with? It leaves us with a sense of personal responsibility. And if you're going to be successful in the reopening, what you have to be is wildly personally responsible. You have got to come to the party with a sense of personal responsibility. And then finally, I want you to listen and observe. The key to reopening is going to be listening and observing. And the reason that's going to be so important is because the more you listen and the more you observe, the better off you're going to be. All right, so here's the foundation. Let's all accept there's good news. Let's all accept the community has risen to the top and that community still matters. Let's acknowledge that there are those who see the world different than you, and they might even be right. That doesn't make you wrong. You can't control another person. Personal responsibility is key. And the key to reopening is going to be listening and observing. Now, those of you who know me, those of you who have worked with me, those of you who've been in webinars in the past, those of you who've been in any of my classes or heard me speak or coached by me know that I am generally and wanting to be encouraging and positive. But I'm going to have a conversation with you for the next 10 minutes that's going to be a little tough. And what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you just to open your hearts and minds and be really receptive to what we're about to talk about. I'm about to peel back the curtain. I'm about to take off the layer, whatever layers of the onion, whatever metaphor you want to use, on what I think is going on and what I think is either going to help us in the reopening or is going to hurt us. There are rough seas ahead, there is no doubt. But what this is all going to get down to is a matter of perspective. And as you know, I always go to Webster.com or dictionary.com to find my definitions because I want to make sure I say what it actually is. And here's the first definition of perspective: the interrelation in which a subject or its parts are mentally viewed. I love that. The interrelation, right? So how things interrelate, in which a subject, something, me, you, this camera, this computer, your desk, your chair, your family, are viewed through the filter of your brain. The capacity to view things, just take a look at this definition for just a minute. The capacity to view things in their true relations or relative importance. Now, you may be going, okay, I get it. But in the next slide, I'm gonna take us all into a little bit deeper water around this. So let's really embrace this. The capacity to view things in their true relations or relative importance. So how do things truly relate to each other? And then when you take those objects or take those principles and you blend them together, how do they measure up against each other relative to importance? Here's the correlation I want us to get before we jump into the deep end of the pool or go into the rough water. There are fundamentally parts to the reopening and parts to this conflict that are significant. And we have to look at the parts, not just the whole. We have to look at the parts in terms of how important they are when related to each other. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of self-discovery right now and a little bit of openness about what your own perspectives are as we go to this next section. So let's look. The first thing I want us to talk about is the thing that I get probably asked the most about, which is, Mike, what the heck is going on? I mean, what, in your opinion, is going on? You guys know I like to avoid speculation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you what I think are the three primary perspectives going on in the world today, particularly in North America, but really all over. So I know some of you are from the Caribbean. I saw a couple folks from elsewhere, but it doesn't matter where you are. There are only three fundamental perspectives that I think people are coming from. The first one is health. There's the perspective of health. And what that means is that I view the world through my personal health. I view the world through what I perceive to be the health of me and the health of those around me. That's perspective number one. Perspective number two is the perspective of money. Money has to do with employment, an ability to pay my bills and feed my family and take care of those I love, my ability to go spend money on things I want to spend money on. That is money. And so the second perspective that people have is this one about money, about employment, about the ability to earn a living, about the ability to spend, about the ability to save, all those kinds of things. The third perspective is freedom. And that is how much are my rights to roam about the planet, my freedom to do the things that I need to do to affect my life and to do things, how are those things being affected? So they're all three perspectives. And remember that we said that it has to do with the capacity to view things in their true relationship or relative importance, or the interrelation in which a subject or its parts are mentally viewed. Here are the parts: health, money, freedom. Now, here's how it works. Given whatever's going on in your world, you are going to tend to have a primary perspective. It doesn't mean it's your only perspective. It means it's a primary perspective. So it is possible, and this is shocking to some people. I know none of you, but you probably know some people like this. It is very possible that you could think that your health is important, the ability to earn a living is important, and your freedom is important. You could think all three are important at the exact same time. But what is starting to happen in the culture is we are starting to see people forcing a choice. And this is grossly unfair. And we're also seeing people start to judge people with a different primary perspective. So what is the difference in a primary perspective and a secondary perspective? A primary perspective simply means I primarily come from this place. Let me share my mom as an example. My mom is not concerned really about money. So that's not her primary perspective, right? They did a nice job of investing. She makes a comfortable income. She's 80 years old though. And she's got some immunocompromised. And so she does have some concern about her health. But in my last call with her, we were having a conversation, and maybe it was a call before that. And she started joking with me and my brothers, saying, I think you boys are gaining some joy in telling me I can't go out and see my friends and go to church and do those kinds of things. She lives in Florida. It's kind of like revenge. You're putting me on reverse restriction. I don't know what her primary perspective is, but that comment meant that her perspective at that moment was a freedom perspective, while being aware she's at risk, but relatively financially secure. So she doesn't have a financial primary perspective, but it doesn't mean she goes out and buys new cars, even though I know she'd like a new car. She doesn't go out and buy a new car and spend money frivolously, but she doesn't have a primary financial perspective. This morning, in my first call early this morning, I had a telephone call with somebody who has got two kids. They're three kids. They're a single parent. They have run out of money. They have run out of money, but they think in another 30 days they're going to run out of money, and they're very scared. So they were talking to me about how can they earn money and feed their children and do the things that are necessary. Doesn't mean that health isn't important, and it doesn't mean their rights aren't important or their freedom's not important. It means based on their primary perspective, money and solvency is a big deal. Here's where the problem comes, you guys. The problem comes when you allow your primary perspective to be the superior perspective. And if we're going to reopen, and we're going to reopen with care and compassion and love and support, we cannot assume the superior perception that my perspective is the superior one. I can say mine is the primary one, but I don't have to say mine is the superior one. Let me share mine with you. I have a primary money perspective. Not that I am hungry for money, but I have employees, and I have a home, and I have bills, and I run a business, and I have people that expect me to be able to generate some money. Do I care about health? Of course. Do I wear a mask if I'm expected to, if I'm asked to? And I have a freedom concern. It doesn't mean that because my primary perspective is financial and the ability to earn a living, which you can imagine it would, since the events business has been wiped out until 2021, basically. It just means that that's my primary perspective while being concerned about health, while being concerned about freedom. Some of you may have a freedom perspective. Some of you may see your primary perspective as freedom, but that doesn't mean you don't care about health. It doesn't mean you don't care about unemployment or money or the ability to earn a living. It just means in the world where you live and in your circumstances, you have a primary perspective. I could read you page after page after page of emails that have been sent to me, or texts that have been sent to me, or Facebook posts that have been sent to me, where somebody takes their primary perspective and uses it a way to judge others because they do not share their primary perspective. So I want us to, as a group, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of you on this webinar, I want us as a group, I want to invite you to join a movement with me. And that's the do not judge movement. Now, are there people who hold on to their perspective and don't care? Are there people who go, I don't care if I get the virus or not. I don't care about your health or not. Yes, those people are out on the lunatic fringe. I'm not talking about them. I am saying that if you have a primary health perspective, or you have a primary freedom perspective, or a primary money perspective, you can respect those with other perspectives, and they should respect you as well. Because here's what's happening. What's happening is the tension. I was driving back from Las Vegas after a conference, and I said this: if this goes on past the 30th of April, we're going to start seeing cracks in the mental and emotional health of people, that eventually the perspectives are going to change. And so for the first 30 days, most people were like, okay, I'm going to be good. I'm going to do what I want to do, and so on and so forth. But as pain increases, the tension between the three perspectives starts to shift. So I want you to ask yourself, based on that, now, let me say it again. It doesn't mean that the other two are not important. If my primary perspective is keeping my business solvent, taking good care of clients, making a living, paying my bills, that's my primary perspective right now. It doesn't mean I don't care about the virus or take it seriously. And it doesn't mean I don't care about freedom and rights and take those seriously. It just means my perspective is different. Now, if I was the lady in Texas who owned the salon, who had a GoFundMe account in excess of, I don't know what it was, maybe somebody knows, it's 100,000, 150,000, maybe my perspective would shift more to something different. I don't want you to hear that one perspective is better than the other. I just want you to hear that different people have different perspectives. So I'm going to just ask you to weigh in. $500,000, Keith? Holy cow. I think, would you go to jail for 500 grand for a few days? I think I might go to jail for a few days for $500,000. Holy smokes. That's amazing. No, she got out of jail. The attorney general paid her bail and she's out. So yeah, that's pretty crazy. So I'd like you to put your primary perspective in the chat. Now, remember, there's no shame in any perspective. I talked to somebody this morning that freedom was their primary perspective. Somebody said that money was primary. Good. Freedom, health, money, health. Good. Health, freedom, money, health for me. Health, money, freedom, health. Good. Yeah, you guys all have different perspectives. I think that's really, really important. Now, I talked to somebody the other day that said something. It is a hard question. It's very hard. I talked to somebody the other day that said something very, very interesting to me. They said, yeah, money, I feel responsible for taking care of my staff. Absolutely. I talked to somebody the other day that said it's very interesting. They said, I have a health priority. My perspective is health, but it's not health for me. It's health for my kids and my parents who are elderly or who are older. I think that's very interesting. So what she's doing is she's managing. Her perspective has to do with who she feels responsible to take care of. And, somebody just said, I feel like it's money because I'm responsible to take care of my staff. And so what all of us have a little bit of a tendency toward one or the other, right? So what I want you to think of is it's very hard, Jenny, to have a tie. It isn't hard though to think of them all as important. It isn't hard to think of them all as critical. But what I know is when you start taking any one of these away from people, they bristle. All of us can handle one, maybe two of these going away for a little while. But when the chronic nature of those things starts to happen, things start to change. Yeah, I love that. So some days my primary perspective changes based on what's happening. I get it. Our primary perspective starts to move. So what I want you to think about, though, is this. You have a primary perspective, and your behavior and your words are about those primary perspectives. So the rule, what we're talking about here is not judgment about what it should or shouldn't be. It's owning the fact that primary perspective has to do with what people are dealing with at that moment. And you nor I have any right to judge it unless and until, right? I mean, if somebody with the virus walks into my house, I mean, people are all around the outside of my house, nobody in my house, washing windows, doing things that, need to be done. But if somebody had COVID, they walked in my house and sat down at my kitchen counter and said, I have COVID. Okay, right? I still have a primary perspective, but I think my health also matters to me at this moment. We were in the grocery store the other day and picking out some fruit, and a lady walked up and walked right in front and no mask, no nothing, and grabbed the fruit and looked up and said, I've already had COVID. You don't have to worry about me. That's not why I'm wearing a mask. What? So, yeah, I think you have to have a balance. I do think you have to have a balance, but I want you to know that all of us have a tendency to have a primary. But I talked to somebody yesterday who's going to be opening their business, and they were telling me a story about how important it is for them to consider all three. But the lead-off statement was, we need to get back to work so our staff and our employees can make a living. And right now, some are really struggling financially. So we need to do all we can to protect their health so that they can earn a living. You see what that is? And so, Diane, in your case, family depends on your family circumstance. When I talked to the single mom the other day who can't feed her children, her primary perspective was money as it related to her family, so she could provide for her family. So she said, I would be willing to risk getting my health a little bit. I'm going to still wear a mask and I'm still going to do social distancing and all that, or physical distancing, but I got to feed my kids. So her family situation drove her to have a different primary perspective. Just like the person I told you about, her primary perspective is driven by her family's health. So she has a primary perspective of health. That's how that works. So now that you get it, and this is very hard for people to get. I mean, all you got to do is scroll through your Twitter feed or Instagram or Facebook, and you'll see people judging other people because they say only one thing's important. And you know what? Maybe I'm naive, but I think the majority of us are pretty rational and pretty sane. Are there some people out on the fringe? Are there some people who don't care? Are there some people that put us in harm's way? Yes. But you know what I believe? I believe you wouldn't be on this call, and I believe there wouldn't be people who, I think most of us are pretty rational human beings. And I think that the majority of us, not all of us, because, crazy don't wash off and you can't fix stupid, but the majority of us get it. But I want to encourage you not to get locked into one and not respect the other. I read a Facebook post yesterday I shouldn't have read because I thought my head was going to explode when I read it. It was like 4 or 5 paragraphs just blistering somebody there was a picture of them having a picnic in a park in a state where it's okay to have a picnic in a park, and everybody at that table was in the same family who had, by the way, been sheltering in place together. That's just not okay. And I want to invite you to join the movement of being kind and considerate and giving people room to see the world a little bit differently, as long as they respect the different perspectives. That's what's most important. So how do you manage that tension? First, maintain your boundaries. Be clear. I said to somebody yesterday, as for me and my house, I said, you needed to say, I appreciate the fact that your perspective is, I don't remember what it was. And as for me, this is my primary perspective, but I respect yours. How can we work together? I think one of them had health and one of them had freedom. How can we work together so that our perspectives are understood? And this is really what we're struggling with every day. I mean, I've had employees of other companies tell me that they're not coming back to work because they've been working at home and they deserve to work at home. That's not a health primary perspective. That's not a money primary perspective. That's a freedom primary perspective. And that's right. Sometimes other people's priorities do affect your priority. And I think that the only thing we can manage is our own. The only thing we can manage is our own. The next one, don't judge. I've already said that. Be fact-based. I don't have to, if I have a primary perspective of freedom and I think I want to give people hugs, but that violates a boundary for you, or that puts you at risk and you have a primary perspective of health, that's just not okay. So the fact says that in order for us to do what we need to do to return to some semblance of order, we need to continually physical distance, minimize our interaction with others. Some of you are locked all the way down. New York, Pennsylvania just got an increased stay in place until I think June the 4th. But I also think while we're looking at that, we have to look at Depression era unemployment rates. We have to look at 35% of suicide hotlines in this country. Excuse me, all suicide hotlines in this country have 35% increase in calls over the last 6 weeks. That's real. And so as real as the virus is, and as real as the unemployment is, and as real as the financial issues are and the freedom is, there's a lot of real. So I can't say this is all that matters when the unintended consequences or intended consequences are different for others. So for instance, if I need to go to the doctor because I have surgery, I need to have a surgery, I got to follow those rules. So when I finish here, I will go here in Arizona. I actually drove by my barbershop yesterday and I saw my barber standing out in front of the barbershop. And he's not a guy that has like voicemail and a reception. He's just a barber. And he's been closed for 8 weeks. And I drove by and I saw his car and I saw his son. So I called the barbershop. They don't even have voicemail. And Gary answered. And Gary said, he's from Russia. And he said, I said, are you open? He goes, no, not till tomorrow. And I said, well, tell me what's going to happen. And he said, here's how the rules are going to go. We're going to have a wait list. You'll wait in your car. You'll wear a mask when you come into the barbershop. There's only going to be 3 people in the barbershop plus the barbers. We're going to wear a mask. We have hand sanitizers at the door. And then he said this, and I love that. He goes, and so these are the rules if you want to get a haircut. You hear those boundaries? Here are the rules if you want to get a haircut. But if you don't want to get a haircut, was the implied message, you don't have to. But do you see the respect for that? Do you see the boundary? He has a primary perspective, right, of getting back to work. He's legally and ethically and morally opening his barbershop. But he also has concern for health, concern for freedom. I'm free not to get a haircut, but I am free to come if I want. And so he's doing a really good job of managing that. But the facts are there are compelling arguments for every primary perspective. Finally, be flexible. Understand that you and I are going to have to figure out a way to start to think through what things are going to need to look like going forward. So let's talk about you, and let's talk about what you can do to be more effective at doing the things that we need to do. First, what I want you to think about is how is it that you can be more effective at doing the things necessary to not expect it to be like it was when we started. I am 100% sure that this is not going to be the same. It is not going to be like it used to be. So we have to stop saying get back to normal. Re-entry is difficult. You know, when I was flying a lot, back when I was traveling a lot and doing gigs, I had constant re-entry issues, right? I'd be traveling for a couple of weeks. I'd get back. I'd have a suit on. I've been on an airplane. I've been living out of a suitcase, and I'd come back home, and I had to kind of reevaluate and get a shower and put some shorts on and figure out my bearings because I hadn't been in that environment in a while. I want you to give yourself time to reacclimate and adjust as well. I want to share something with you that I've shared with all of my clients. Many of you are on the phone or on the call today or on the webinar today. I don't want you to underestimate your own the impact this has had on you emotionally or the impact this has had on you psychologically. You've got to be able to reacclimate slowly. You know, it's sort of like jumping in cold water or stepping in a jacuzzi that's really hot. It takes your body a minute to kind of acclimate to the new temperature. It's going to take you as a leader. It's going to take you as an individual contributor. It's going to take you as a family member some time to reacclimate as things start to come back online. What your brain is going to want to do is your brain is going to want to judge. I've got a buddy who was in a oyster bar the other day in Florida. They've just opened up, their favorite place. And he said that the best thing about being in that restaurant, he said tables were probably 10, 15, 20 feet apart, and they managed it very well. He said the best thing about being in that restaurant was how enthusiastic everybody was to support the hostess and the waiters. we went to get pizza yesterday, and the pizza place has plexiglass across their door, and they serve everything under the plexiglass. And asked the question, when are you going to reopen? And they said, we're going to open Monday. But you know what? We really don't know how it's going to go. We're just going to take it a day at a time and try to figure out this new world we're living in. And we hope you'll help us do that. That's exactly the attitude we've got to have. This reacclimation has got to be very important. So if you're a leader on this call and you're bringing people back, know that the reacclimation is going to take some time, and that the sensitivity to their primary perspective going to be very important. Number 3, one of the things I want you to think about is I want you to think about this notion of being patient with others, the process, and yourself. So there's 3 parts. There's going to be a process for getting the business back, for you going back to church, synagogue, community group, mosque, whatever it is you do, to going back to your favorite restaurant, to going to meetings. I was watching a video. They're using some footage of me in a speaking engagement that I did last year. And there are about 1,000 people in this room, and they're in a big ballroom, and there's the stage. And I looked in that room, and I don't know if you guys have done this, but the first thing I thought was, oh my gosh, those people are close together. I never thought about that a year ago, but I think about it now. Have you watched anything on TV where you see somebody hugging, or you see a big group of people and you kind of feel a little angst about that? I don't want you to misunderstand this notion of how reacclimation is going to affect you, because it is going to affect you. So different people are going to come along at different times. Let's talk a little bit about number 4 thing about you before I talk about the difficulty. Reentry is stressful. Whether you're re-entering from a trip, whether you're re-entering after you've been in the hospital and you're trying to do rehab, whatever, re-entry is stressful. Self-care has never been more important than it is right now. Every single person needs to manage the notion of self-care now more than ever. I have to. I got to tell you, I predicted that the first week of May, things would start to crack, things would become uneasy. I unfortunately was correct. But even for me this week, I've started noticing a little bit of, it's starting to be a little tougher, right? And so I've got to really think about, and I want to encourage you to think about your own self-care. Are you staying active? Are you turning off that poison of the news? Are you not? I know some people think, oh, I got to look because I got to know what's going on. No, you don't. I mean, my clients and my family knows if you got to get a dose of the poison, 10 minutes or less in the morning, and be done with it for the day, because you don't have the luxury of that going back into reopening. Manage your energy well. Please focus your energy on the things that you have control of right now. I said to a group this morning, I said, we need to be focused one day at a time. And in some of your states, some of the states that like New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and some of the others, you guys need to be focused on it an hour at a time. How do I get through this hour doing things like staying connected to people, doing things that make a difference, calling people? I had somebody the other day say that they call, I think it was a nursing home or retirement community, and just talk to random strangers and say they were just trying to check in. I said, why do you do that? They said, I just have to get outside my head. I have to get outside of myself. And I think that's really, really important. All right, let's talk about the 3 difficult circumstances. Number 1. The first difficult circumstance, and you can look at this as if you are the boss or if you are a person who has a boss. The first difficult situation is the boss or the company is asking for people to come back before the people are comfortable coming back. So put yourself in whichever circumstance you need. Either you're the boss asking for people to come back before they're comfortable, or you're the person being asked. You can look at that either way. The second thing I want you to think about in the second circumstance, which is one all of us are probably going to have to deal with on some level, is a colleague or family member or friend that's being extremely anxious or really judgmental, right? Like they're really coming out hard and judgmental and anxious. And then the third circumstance is you'll have clients or customers who have varying perspectives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through these 3 circumstances so that you can have absolute clarity about what you need to do. Here we go. Number 1, let's say that you have a boss or a company that's asking you to come back before you're comfortable. So bosses on the phone, leaders on the phone. I'm going to talk about this from both sides. If you are the boss or if you are the person being asked to come back. First, acknowledge the need to reopen. If you are being asked to come back before you're comfortable, you need to be able to acknowledge to your company, to your boss, and to your leader the need to reopen. It doesn't mean you need to reopen today, but you need to be able to acknowledge that. If you are a boss, you need to be able to acknowledge the need to reopen to your team. You need to be courageous in saying there will come a time when reopening is not going to be an option, that we do need to reopen. How we do that could be up for debate or discussion, but not necessarily the way we think it will. Share your concern honestly and non-judgmentally. If you are the person being asked to come back, share your concern. I am concerned. So somebody the other day has an autoimmune disease. Their boss is asking them to come back to work. And not today, but in the next, they're doing a slow roll in of people coming back to work. They're in a pretty crowded office. They actually looked at all the desks in the office. The desks are actually more than 10 feet apart. They're 13 to 14 feet apart. But one of the people said, I have an immune deficiency disease and I'm immunocompromised. I'm not comfortable. Okay, so that employee shared their concern. Boss, if you're the boss, you've got to take that into consideration. You've got to take that seriously. It isn't easy. It isn't pleasant, but we have to be able to look at that in a way that helps us negotiate. Ask questions. First question, if you are the person being asked to come back and you are uncomfortable, just ask what they're doing relative to safety and how they're managing health, safety, and so forth. Because if you have a primary perspective of health, you just want to know that. That's legit. Bosses, you want to pre-communicate this. Before you talk about reopening, you want to talk about here's the plan to do it. And there are a lot of plans out there right now, really good ones. I mean, there are infectious disease clinics who are issuing protocols. There are people issuing protocols to help people be more successful. So I want you to think about how are you going to do that. The next thing I want you to think about if you're the boss or the company or the employee is this. If you have to drive reopening because the business is at stake or there's something compelling that has to be reopened and you aren't comfortable going back, you can exercise, if you have it available, vacation or PTO. Bosses, if you have to reopen and they are uncomfortable, or like this person's legitimately has 2 immunocompromising diseases, that person should not be in an office right now. So how do you help them be successful? Now, the final one that I didn't put on here, and I just realized it, is we've got to be more flexible with how we work. I heard this argument. It's actually a legitimate argument, and we need to think about it. The argument was, we've been working remotely for 8 weeks, for 10 weeks, for 12 weeks. We've been somehow muddling through our business for 6 to 8 weeks. So why is it we have to come back? Why is it we have to recongregate? If you're a boss or a leader on this call, you have to be able to answer that question because it's a legitimate question. There are a lot of people who have never had to do any of it. And you're absolutely right, Brian. Good for you that you didn't have to do it. And thank you for being in the trucking industry because you have kept it alive, and my grocery store and I and my family appreciate it. But there are people who haven't. And that's a great question, Megan. What about people who don't want to take vacation because they have nowhere to go? That's fine. You might have to start working through something with them to continue to work remotely. These are new. This is a whole new world, everybody. And we're going to have to see the world differently. I talked to the president of a company 2 weeks ago who is eliminating 12,000 square feet of office space that they were about to sign a new lease on because they're more efficient with a certain percentage of their staff working remotely. There's no law that says it has to go back to the way it was. So if you're the boss or you're the employee, I want you to start thinking about creative ways. Now, there's some jobs you can't do that, right? If you're a transaction coordinator, maybe you can. If you're a receptionist, you can't do a receptionist job from home unless you have voice over IP. So I want you to start thinking about that. At some point, though, The perspectives have got to come into balance, and we've got to figure it out. Now, this is going to give us a headache, because what most of us want to do is say, drop the curtain, raise the curtain. This is what has to happen. It's going to require more flexibility. Let's talk about colleagues, friends, or family that are extremely anxious or judgmental. First thing we've got to do is acknowledge their perception is real. I get that it's scary. I get that it's difficult. I completely understand that you're anxious, or that you're afraid, or that you're frustrated, or that you feel trapped. I completely get it. Share your own story and what you're doing to realize freedom, find money, do what you've got to do so that you can, and that's what I do. I just simply share what I'm doing to do what I can around my primary perspective of money, while protecting the health of me and those I love and care about, and the general public that I interact with from time to time, and also not surrender every single freedom in the world. I just share my story. Doesn't mean my story is the right story. I just say, here's something that I tried myself, and it seems to be working for me. Because doing that starts to get us focused on something that makes a big difference. So what I want you to think about is how we do things in a way that avoids arguing or attempting to convince them to do it differently. We have to stop arguing on Facebook. We have to stop arguing with each other about what's right, because the perspectives are so critical. And as long as I honor yours and you honor mine, we're going to be okay. Be respectful, but avoid changing your entire process of reopening. So if you're a boss and you're going to reopen the company or reopen your office, you have to reopen. But what you can do is define reopening given the three perspectives. I'd take those three perspectives and think through them. And then finally, and what's most important, whether you're a boss or whether you're an individual contributor or not, is to ask people this question: what can I do to be the most helpful? What can I do to help you feel less anxious or less frustrated during this time? Let's say they're judgmental. I had a person talking to me just last week, I think it was last week, and they were just blistering people that had a different primary perspective than them. And I just simply said this: how can I be helpful? And they had a freedom perspective as their primary perspective. I said, how can I be helpful with you moving through this, and at the same time giving other people permission to have a different point of view? That's a difficult thing to do. And frankly, it was very difficult for him to get his head around that. All right, let's talk about the final one before I give you some things to do. Number one, customers with varying perspectives. This is going to be really important. I've right now got 3 speaking customers. All 3 have different perspectives. One says, absolutely no way, not getting together. Another one says, we're going to go virtual for everybody except the speakers. We want the speakers on site, but we're going to make the customers virtual. So the customers are going to watch, the clients are going to watch, and all of you are going to be on stage or in breakout rooms or whatever. It's a very interesting balance, right? So they have a desire, a perspective for health by keeping them separate, the audience virtual. They have a financial perspective in that they want to still have the conference, and they have a freedom perspective by giving their audience choices. I love that. I have another one that says, nope, no meeting, no how, no way, we're not reopening. Go out of your way to acknowledge the perspective of your customer and client and prepare for that. There are real estate companies doing amazingly creative things to make sure, because here's the deal: everybody's reopening is going to be different. So ask clarifying questions so you get a sense of their primary perspective so you can blend those. For instance, I was talking to somebody yesterday that gave me such great insight. They said, Mike, we've got a lot of audiences. They were in real estate. They said, we've got our agents, we've got our buyers, we've got our sellers, but we also have the neighborhood where the houses are listed. That's such an interesting perspective. So we have to build our reopening strategy based on what is going to be the one that respects the most people. And that's why you have to be prepared. You have to be in a mode that says you've got to have the mask, you've got to have the hand sanitizer, you've got to have the gloves, you've got to have whatever you need. You've got to have the options. You've got to be able to provide for your customers and clients options. We can do it this way, or we can do it this way, or we can do it this way. It's like when you parented children. When you parented kids, if you wanted them to clean their room, you didn't just say, do you want to clean your room or not, or go clean your room. If you did a good job, you said, do you want to clean your room now, or do you want to clean your room after dinner? The implied message is cleaning your room is not an option. So you want to prepare how those things are going to work so that when you start to find yourself in a situation, you don't want to be unprepared. And so what I want you to think about, I want you to think how you're going to be able to manage that. Yeah, I love that. Vicky says, I'm an essential worker. However, my husband and son are not and staying at home. Based on what worked best for our family, I actually stayed at a hotel during the peak of the crisis. That's a great example of managing all the perspectives, right? So what Vicky did, which is brilliant, she said, I'm essential. Therefore, I've got a money perspective, but I also care about health. And so we worked out a way to do it in a very effective way. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And so what I want you to think through is where can you really execute in alignment, in such an alignment with their needs, right? So in all of our clients, we're talking to them all the time about how do we make allowances within the guidelines of what reopening looks like to be most successful. So let's talk about a little bit about things that you can do. Number one, be self-aware. Be aware of your biases, which is different than a perspective. A bias means I think I am more right than you are. That's a bias that we have to and need to surrender. We also need to make absolutely sure that what we're doing every day is we're finding ways and opportunities to say, you know what, I wonder if there is a way that I can be better at asking questions, that I can do the things that are necessary while I'm approaching the things that are sensitive to other people. So how do I ask questions and do that in a meaningful way? Don't assume other people have your primary perspective. Do not assume, do not believe, do not think through this idea that other people have your primary perspective. Be willing to explore that. And then finally, tolerate a little bit of discomfort, you guys. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for us going forward. We need to be able to figure out how we can do these things in a way that makes us more successful. So I want you to think about this. If we think through the notion of where we are in our primary perspective and how we are doing things that make us more successful, what behaviors do you need to change now? What things do you need to think about such that you are figuring things out one perspective at a time? And so I want you to start thinking about that. And I'd like for you just in the chat to ask yourself, what is it that I could do differently coming out of this that I didn't do before? I think that and I agree with you, John, 100%. John said, hey, what if in the real estate business, this has moved us forward 4 or 5 years? I think that's a great perspective. That's the kind of thing we want to be thinking about. So just put in the chat here, Mike, here's something that I think I could do different now in the reopening. Is it be less judgmental? Is it not focus as much on other people's stuff? Is it asking better questions? Is it making sure I'm prepared for all the perspectives, right? If I got a person, for instance, I'm dealing with a person right after this call that has a primary perspective of freedom. I know that their primary perspective is freedom. Their secondary perspective is money, but they're concerned about people's health. And so I love this. Be prepared. Take each of my team's individuals' perspectives. That's great. We need to communicate and ask more questions. Absolutely. Choose empathy. Be more flexible for my clients. These things are great. And I think that be prepared. I love that, Joanna, when you say, what about the people who say, why do we have to come back? It's been working all along. You guys, I got to tell you, that is a legitimate question. And because that's the way we've chosen to do things is not the best way. And so I want you to just start really committing to how you're going to do that in a more effective way. It came to my attention that some of you are not subscribed to get the information you need. So if you want to subscribe to our stuff and you want me to notify you in the future, please let me know. I love that, Lori, compassionately setting boundaries. I love that. It's very, very strong. Promote abundance and growth mindset. We've got to move forward, though. You guys, we have to move the country forward, and we have to do it being mindful of our health, mindful of the financial realities, and really mindful of people's need for freedom. You can't lock people up and compromise their health and break them down financially all at the same time. So I asked for a favor. I'm going to just publish a poll right now. And what I'd like for you to do is I'd like just for you to answer the following questions for me as I start finishing up. I need some feedback from you. I'm going to do a live event at the end of May, but I'm going to do it for 3 hours, and I'm going to create an opportunity to build out the last 6 years, the next 6 months of the year. But I don't know when it's time or when it's not time. You'll get a copy of this very shortly. So if you would just go into the poll, it should be on your screens right now, and just give me some answers to each of those. I would really appreciate it. And while you're looking at those, I want you to think about this. To what extent is how you're approaching this going to make you more effective? What are the things that you are going to be able to do coming out of this that you didn't do in it? And I want to encourage you to say, what does reopening mean to you? Because you see what a lot of people are doing. Thank you for all of you flooding in these answers. I really appreciate it. We've been talking a lot about your perspective and your primary perspective and how that looks and how do I manage other people. But what I would like for you to think about is, do you have a way to manage your own reentry? Let me give you, your own reopening. I have thought a lot about what reopening means to me and how I'm going to move back into this. How am I going to go back? Because I will not have the luxury of reopening relative to I can't just call a big meeting together in a big auditorium with 1,000 people. Hotels won't let it, governors won't do it, and I wouldn't do it. So I want to ask you to think about what it is that reopening means to you. What are you looking forward to? Is it something as simple as a haircut that I'm going to go get as soon as this webinar is over? Is it something as simple as a massage, a jog, being outside with your family? And ask yourself, how will you be positively different coming out of this that you may not have been going into it? So where in your world do you think that you're going to be different? What things are you going to do that you maybe lost track of before we went? I love what John said about real estate. Maybe this has put us 4 to 5 to 6 years into the future. There are things going on in real estate with virtual closings and virtual showings that people would never have done 10 weeks ago. But I want you to think about you, and I want you to think about your own opportunity to be better at the things that you've learned about you. You see, I think that, thank you, Colleen. Yeah, gathering with friends is a great example. And I think being able to think through those things is what really matters. The topic of the 3-hour meeting, Lori, would be how to make the last 6 months of the year the best 6 months of the year you've ever had. So I would go back, for those of you who have been with me in my Maestro program and that kind of stuff, I'm going to reignite what happens relative to reestablishing your purpose, reestablishing your values. How do you start building out your influence in a more effective way so that you can be better? How do you build a comprehensive plan that will get you focused on the things that really matter in a more global sense rather than just what has largely been right in front of us? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually do it from my studio, the studio in Vegas. We're going to have workbooks and breakouts and those kinds of things. Yeah, great. I love this. I love the things that you guys are going to be doing differently, because I think these things are the things that, getting back to the gym, Orange Theory. Yeah. Yeah. And Cheryl, if you hear when Orange Theory is opening, let us know. I think a lot of people are jonesing and get back to Orange Theory. So I'm going to leave the poll open for just a few more minutes. And if those of you haven't answered the poll, if you would just jump on there real quick and answer the poll for me. It's completely anonymous. I have no idea who's saying what. So if you tell me I'm high for wanting to do it, I totally get it. This is going to be recorded. I'll go back to the subscription page. If you want to subscribe to anything that we're talking about, you can go to mikestaver.com and you can subscribe. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it as always. Unless you think there is a topic we haven't covered in the last 10 weeks, I'm not going to do another COVID recovery or COVID coping webinar, but I am going to shift in the next couple of weeks to a webinar format where I'm helping you do your business going forward, back to the other side. So thank you all. I appreciate it. Health and blessings to every one of you. If there's anything we can do, you can always reach us at info@mikestaver.com. I am doing sales meeting drop-ins and team meeting drop-ins. If you want me to do any of that, I'm happy to do it. Just send a request to info@mikestaver.com. The investment's very small. I'm happy to drop in. Usually the drop-ins are 15 to 30 minutes. Don't worry, Shun, I'm going to go get a haircut in just a few minutes. So anything I can do to help, info@mikestaver.com. Be well. Blessings to all of you, and have a great weekend. Do something productive and of service.